Hey folks, how about some words from Merrily Mazza? We do the work's very own corporate correspondent. She's got an opinion about this whole lean business and everything that's going on with COVID.
Hi, folks. Well, we're in a pandemic crisis. I have a son who's on the front lines. He's a nurse. I have another son who has a small business that's shut down. So what I'm seeing online and the begging I'm seeing from frontline healthcare workers for personal protective equipment, for N95 masks, I'm seeing even hospitals jump in now and say, we need to have a drive. We need to get people to turn in their masks. We're short of supplies. You know what? I can't sew masks, so I'm going to do something else. I'm going to explain a little bit about how we got in this situation. Let's talk about our for-profit healthcare system. You work in a hospital providers and you've got an administrative staff and your executives are making $1 million salaries. Here's what they didn't do. They didn't stockpile masks. They didn't stockpile personal protective equipment. They didn't stockpile ventilators, or at least store them in inventory for the chance of a pandemic that people knew were coming. Why didn't they do this? I'll tell you why. Because if a ventilator is not hooked up to someone, it's not making any money for that hospital chain. So sitting in a storage room somewhere for the chance of a pandemic is just useless to them. These are decisions that these hospital administrators made not to have inventory of this material, not to have PPE, not to have respirators in inventory and mass quantities. They made that decision. That's what for-profit healthcare administrators do. So I'm going to bring this down right to the level of the administrators of your hospital, the people making those $1 million salaries. What did they do? They did nothing to prepare for this. Keep that in mind when we come out the other end, because this system has got to end and those people have got to go. Let's use an example here in Minnesota. We have a major hospital chain. It is run by somebody who's making $1.8 million a year. His background is in statistics. He initially worked at Boeing doing statistical process control. He's a lean methodology zealot. Anybody with an MBA or has worked in a manufacturing plant knows what lean is. That's eliminate defects. This is the most major defect on the planet. His frontline healthcare providers, one of them was on the front page of the Minneapolis Star-Tribune yesterday, getting N95 masks from her brother who runs an automotive shop. And she said some of the nurses are trying to go to Menards to buy them. These are people working for this man, James Hereford, the lean zealot, and they have no equipment. And lean, yes, no mistakes. Oh, by the way, lean also means don't carry inventory either. You do just in time, which maybe works for Toyota, or maybe it works for the manufacturing plant he repeatedly cites that makes airbags in Utah. And I wonder if that plant in Utah making car airbags tells their workers to go out and buy their own tools. That's where we are. And we are not going back to this. We can get through this crisis, but we are not going back to the system. We are not having multimillionaire lean bullshit artists talking about this stuff and running this show and providing healthcare to the American public when what they really want is their multi-million-dollar salary. Let's talk about one more thing, and I think this is maybe just idle speculation, but the Wall Street Journal, even a week or two ago, was starting to get antsy. And remember, these are people in the corporate world that are speaking to each other. This is not the general public that typically reads this. They're getting nervous. They think people are going to come out the other end of this and demand a whole revamp of this bullshit for-profit healthcare system and the for-profit insurance companies, and they're getting nervous. And so how did they stop this from happening? I mean, they plan You talk about planning. They're ahead of the game. They're actually planning for what they're going to do at the other end and how they're going to diffuse this fury. And what they're saying is, yes, this could easily happen, and we've got to get in front of this. And one article said, well, we're going to blame the government for a slow response. Remember, that's a typical line, blame the government. And, there's value in that. The government did have a slow response. But wait for this. If it gets too dicey and the public and the regular working people are making too many demands and got their pitchforks out, these people will throw Trump under the bus in a heartbeat. They will make him the focus of everyone's fury. I can see it all now. Trump did all this. It's not the for-profit system that we've been dealing with for decades. It's him. And they will make him a target, so your fury and your anger and the other end is focused on him. He's incompetent, which he is. And then you will forget about demanding that this system get exploded and a new system take its place. Another thing I'm seeing posted, and I spent years in the corporate world and was an executive, I'm seeing nothing compared to this. I was not a hero in the healthcare professions, that's for sure. But what I'm seeing is nurses and frontline healthcare professionals saying that there are COVID emergency teams being formed in all these massive hospital chains. And you know who's on them? It's every manager and executive in the company. And they're saying the nurses and the docs and all the people on the front line, the people who probably have some of the best ideas for how to deal with this in a crisis, are being excluded. They're not being listened to. They're not being incorporated in those emergency response teams. And I'm seeing this from all over the country, not just here in Minnesota. And let me tell you why that is happening. First of all, the people that you want on these teams are the people who are frontline providers, because they're the ones that can think on their feet. They can talk about emergency responses. They can think of ways to deal with it, whether it's just getting patients into the ER, because they're the front line. They're seeing it. Why are they being excluded? I'll tell you why. Because they don't want the frontline people to see how dysfunctional this whole hospital management is. I think they're paralyzed. I think they're dysfunctional, paralyzed, frightened, fearful. The emperor has no clothes, and this is all going to come out if people actually see it. And so they're building a wall around this whole administrative function. Everybody's afraid to make a decision. That typically happens in any kind of corporate panic decision. They're moving it up the food chain, waiting for somebody at the administrative level, these overpaid people who don't even have the supplies for their own staff, and they're waiting for them to make a decision. But they don't want the frontline people who are dealing with the patients, who are risking their own lives and their families' lives. They don't want them to see that dysfunction. They cannot let them see that. And I'm telling you, it's sheer dysfunction, paralysis, fear. There is also a liability concern, and I'm telling you that's coming up. And then the other thing they need to figure out is how to bill for all this. And don't forget, that's going on too. So that's why you are being excluded when you are the people, you, frontline healthcare providers, because you will see things and you will have ideas, and that's why you're being excluded.
Well, there you have it, folks. The 3 things that you can do right now. Go to our Facebook page and follow our Facebook page. We do the work. Go to our website, sign up for our mailing list, and keep informed on the rapidly changing things. Drop us a small monthly donation so we can keep cranking out content. 100% of the production of this information comes from inside our own homes with our own gear in between the times when we're working full-time jobs.